You are listening to the Practicing People's Podcast. I'm CJ Hammond.
And I'm Jordan White. Together, we'll be taking a journey into the practices that help us align with our mind, body, and soul.
So take a deep breath, release, and remain curious as we explore new ways to enhance our lives.
Welcome to the show, everyone. We're so happy you're here with us. And I'm so happy to have our guest today, Alexi Kyle. Just a true gift to this earth. Alexi Kyle is a somatic practitioner, breathwork healing artist, yogi, and intuitive guide. After leaving her corporate career at the start of 2023, Alexi fully embraced her true calling, helping others awaken to their fullest potential and embody their purest selves. In her practice, Alexi focuses on empowering her clients through breath, movement, creative expression, spiritual practices, helping them to break free from limiting patterns like victimhood, imposter syndrome, fear of failure, perfectionism, scarcity mindset, unworthiness, and self-sabotage. Alexi offers a unique approach to healing by reconnecting individuals with their inner unique voice and their unique creative expression. Her practice centers on moving energy through the breath and the body to open the heart and come back into harmony and connection with oneness. The essence of this work is about cultivating deeper self-love, self-knowing, authentic self-expression, vulnerability, humility, accountability, self-worth. With Alexi's guidance, her clients learn to live and celebrate simply being consciously alive, tapping into the endless joys life offers, and ultimately falling in love with who they truly are. Alexi holds space for you to explore your divine gifts, ignite your creativity, unapologetically express yourself, and reach new heights in your life, ultimately helping you to be your own healer and the artist of your life. Alexi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Bravo.
Oh, thank you.
Alexi, it is a pleasure to get to speak with you today. That is quite the introduction, and I don't even know if those words serve justice because for the listeners, we actually just got led right before we started this podcast through a little breath work to center ourselves into this conversation by Alexi. And I think Jordan would agree with me that for the 90 seconds that felt like an hour of calm and relaxation before we were centered into this conversation, alleviating any nerves we had or anything other than just putting us in here. So first and foremost, thank you for that little session we just went through. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, CJ. It was fun.
Yes, it was. And so my first question is to you. I was able to, you had sent us one of your breathwork sessions, a guided breathwork session. And right off the bat, it starts with something that you said that hit me immediately. You said the inner voice is so subtle. And really connecting that to then, if you lose that connection, you're really losing the connection to your truth. And my question is what led you to the path that you're on now, where you are more connected to your truth than ever, as in 2023, something gave you a shift into this position now? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, it starts beyond 2023, of course, or before 2023. And I don't know how far back we really want to go, but I would say my healing journey had started probably after my dad passed suddenly in 2009. I was in my senior year of high school and right before going to college, University of Colorado. And I found this like inner voice through the pain and the suffering that I had endured with losing my father. And I remember walking into the yoga studio in Boulder and seeing the teachers across the desk checking me in. And I just was hit by this their energy, their inner peace, their inner knowing, their deep inner knowing of themselves. And it struck me. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, I want what they have. Like, I could tell something was missing. So important was missing inside of me. And so I didn't have therapy at that time of my life. My therapy was in my movement practice, was through yoga. And I played college soccer, so movement has always been a part of my life. And I think before I really had like this level of consciousness that I do now, I was able to kind of channel what I needed to through moving my body my whole life as an athlete. And it developed in a new way through my yoga practice. This practice is what has it has been a part of my journey from the beginning. It's what started me in this path. The thing is, instead of continuing on this path that my heart was leading me on, I was so consumed by other people's expectations of me, of having to show up as a different version of who I truly was, out of fear that if I didn't, I wouldn't be accepted or loved by my family, by my peers, by my community. I wouldn't be seen as successful or as a true professional. And so, time and time again, I hit this crossroads on my journey where it was like, okay, do you want to follow your passion? Do you want to follow your heart and go this health and wellness healing road? It would show up in flavors, nutrition, acupuncture, yoga, whatever it might be. It was follow this. And then I would get there and I would be at the edge, literally, and I would choose security, or my thought of what security meant to me at the time, which was the corporate world, which was a 9 to 5 job. It was doing commercial real estate or sales or something that I thought equaled finance, like finances that were safe and secure, and praise from my family. And what I was doing the whole time was like not listening to that inner voice. For the longest, for the majority of my life, I wasn't listening to my own inner voice and my own inner guidance. And it got to the point about 10 years into this corporate world where I was trying to juggle both, right? Having both. And the part that I kept sacrificing was my heart, my calling. And I completely, it took this like losing myself to finding myself again. And to the point where, I mean, my whole life was unraveling. And it wasn't unraveling on the outside either. It was unraveling on the inside. I was great marriage, amazing wedding, amazing friends, amazing job, super successful in my career. But on the inside, I felt completely empty. And I remember at that point, I couldn't take it anymore. And I asked for a reference for a therapist. And in one of my first calls with my therapist, she said, she was like, you're living in lines and you need to be living in swirls. Like, your essence is not this. You are meant to do this. You are meant to swirl. And if you don't make that switch, you are going to live your life a bitter woman. And at that time, I was seeing it playing out in my life, like where I wasn't in control of my mind or my emotions or anything because I completely lost myself. So that has been my journey to rediscovering my inner voice, was this like call and this cry for help that was coming from the inside of like, you have completely ignored me for too long, and like, it's the only way.
Yeah. Well, Alex, thank you for going there and for trusting this space too with the vulnerable, um, information there as far as what you endured and experienced, and losing a parent and all of that. So you mentioned slightly throughout that, you know, um, your response there, some of the challenges you faced along the way of kind of rediscovering yourself, kind of getting back in touch with yourself. What are maybe one or two specific um, challenges that you're really proud of overcoming throughout that time?
I would say for me, I think just taking that leap of faith is the biggest thing. Um, I was terrified to actually do it, to do differently, to trust in the unknown. And, it was so easy for me to, easy. Healing is a journey. So it's a lot of facing myself. Um, it was easy to go on the journey, but to actually like offer it as a service to others, right? To be in service to others was what was really terrifying. I had so many preconceived notions or like limiting false beliefs around like, I'm not expert enough, or I'm not um I'm not skilled enough. I don't know enough. I haven't done it long enough. I'm not healed enough, you know? And it stopped me every chance it could from doing the thing that I was meant to do. And that's not to say, to hold myself to this light of like, I'm a healer, right? And I am and you are not. No, the truth is we all are. And I think I had so much reluctance to step into that within my own self, step into my own healership from my own life. And when I was able to kind of like switch it, I think even in that, my ego was playing in like, I can't hold space for others because, I held the identity of a healer to like on this pedestal, like something that I couldn't achieve or something that I wasn't good enough for. And so it stopped me from really just seeing simply how I'm already doing it for myself. And so I think one of the biggest challenges really that I've overcome has been that. I mean, like just the getting started for me was the most terrifying thing ever. And it was terrifying for a reason. I mean, it's like that's how you're going in the direction that you're supposed to go. And that was a big challenge that I overcame too, was just even having that awareness of, oh, before it used to stop me. And now it's like, oh, okay, this fear is coming up, this anxiety is coming up. Let's be curious about it. Let's follow that. What's this about? Not being scared of it.
So with that, there's this through line of life, and the people that go for theirs. There's this common thread that I always hear, and we've heard it on this podcast before, but I'm so curious to you because you talked about being on the edge, and it sounds like you fell into the fear versus falling away from it. What is there a skill or trait that you personally can think to or recall to that allowed you to feel into that fear versus pull away from it? Because it seems that there people listening to this will resonate with what you're talking about so readily because it resonates that I don't all the buts you said, like, but I'm not expert enough, but this, but that, but that. What allowed Alexi to say, you know what? Forget all the noise. It's time to show up for me, for my heart, for myself, because I can't sacrifice that anymore.
It was this it was this realization that it was like this moment of truth of like, could it really be possible that there is no other way? And for me, I'll say, as you were asking me that question, the thing that just kept like coming forward was prayer. I did not grow up a religious person. I did not grow up in a religious household. I did not go to church growing up. Um, Losing my father, the reason why I say it started my healing journey is because it opened me up to spirit. It opened me up to something beyond. And when I talk about this fear of the unknown and this deep inability to trust myself or something greater, right? That was the thing that stopped me all along. It had opened up. I mean, the losing my father was this gift in a way, because it opened me up to there's something so much greater here that I hadn't really understood yet. And as I continued on this path, and as I went to take this leap of faith, it was prayer and meditation. I would sit in meditation sometimes for hours, hours. This isn't like I was really going through something at a time, and I would wake up before the sun rose. I don't even know. I wouldn't even look at my clock, like 4 a.m. And I would be sitting there for hours because I was in such a place of deep hurt, and I was so lost. And so the combination of just sitting there and being with myself, because I realized at the time that the only thing that could really um, make me feel better was myself, was just to witness myself in my pain and in my suffering and in my fear and in my confusion. And so that's what meditation was for me, is this reflection of like, this is real. Like what you're feeling is real, and it's not something you can ignore or deny anymore. And in that place of hopelessness, I prayed. I prayed, and I like would see these visions of like, and hear these like messages, and it's my higher self, it's not, I'm not saying like it's anything more than that, but of like, just take the leap. We've got you. Just take the leap. And it kept coming and it kept coming, and I didn't listen. I heard it and I heard it and I felt it, but it took me building that up and like coming back, the consistent practice that I had of coming back to myself in whatever way that was. It wasn't always in seated meditation, but it was just having this level of consciousness of what am I feeling, and not having to make sense of it. And then asking for guidance, which is honestly what ultimately got me there. That plus having my community of support that I built around me, teachers, mentors, and things like that, that reflected back to me, you have to do this. There's no other way. So the external validation piece of me that was like still something I really needed was met there. But really what it was the internal thing. It was like having my internal meet me there.
Yeah. Yeah. When we talked earlier, Lex, we talked a little bit about you can only take your clients as far as you've gone.
Yeah.
Right. And it's clear that you are in the line of work that you are meant to do. Right. And it's just this connection between who you are and how you support people is so just pure. So happy that you've found this, and that hopefully the clients you continue to serve get to experience you, right? And I saw a quote the other day. It's kind of reminding me of what you're saying. It reads, if you don't become the ocean, you'll be seasick every day.
Mm,
Right.
Beautiful.
mm,
And what I hear you talking about is really just leaning in, and thank you for bringing it up, CJ, right? Like leaning into the uncertainties of life, and the the your body even talking to you, that those voices that you're hearing in your mind, that are pulling you certain directions, whatnot. So it's so beautiful what you're saying. And I'm curious, you brought up your community. Is there maybe a teacher or two that in particular was
Yes.
really impactful along your journey?
Yes. I would say, oh my gosh, so many. But I would say the first person who really um, reflected back to me, like, girl, stand in your worth, stand in your value. I was early, mid-20s, New York City, in a really competitive commercial office leasing, commercial real estate industry. Um, And I had a life coach, and that's was the essence of her work, was like fierce self-confidence. Her name is Vivace Max Victor. And she helped me see how I was, wanting to be in these spaces and had made my way, right? But I was kind of like cutting myself out, like cutting myself at the knees, even being in the space, fear of like, I'm the only one of the only women in here, and I'm not from New York, in all these different ways. And she really helped me to just build this level of confidence in myself that I had lost in going through my own journey of loss and grief and growth, like coming into myself. She was the first one, and she was the reason why I moved from New York City to California, because ultimately she was like, you need to chase your dream, and your dream is not here. And in California, I'll say three of my greatest mentors and teachers to this day. One is Diane Hudock Pleater. She is an amazing yogi, student of yoga. She is a biofield healer and tuner. She's my mentor. She does a lot of like self-alchemy mentorship work. David Elliott, who is breathwork facilitator and healer, like beyond gifted and connected. And Sherry Brown, who is my somatic therapist. And all of them have equally been key people on my journey to discovering my gifts and my purpose. Because at the time, I wasn't going in to work with them because I wanted to heal other people. I wanted to heal myself. I was lost. I didn't know my purpose. I didn't know who I was. And so I went to them for help to rediscover who I was. And in doing that, I learned that I can also help people too. But it's so funny because I remember, just growing up multiple times throughout my life. Like I remember sharing a cab from the airport into New York City with this gentleman. Don't know why, don't even know why I had this this situation happen. But I remember him saying to me, you should be a life coach. And I was like, what is he talking about? And like, just so many like points in my life where I had some reflection like that. When I started teaching yoga after school, after I graduated college, people saying, "You're natural." Who was the one that like counted me out? Myself. Never did I think I was ever going to do this. And it was having amazing teachers and mentors that were reflecting back to me my highest self.
Yeah.
I, I
Before you dive in,
bow to
CJ,
them.
something that's so key in what you said there, Lex, is none of these people told you who you are. They offered the space for you to explore that and to
Yeah.
define that for yourself. And that is so, so key in the work you're doing, coaching, depending on the level of therapy, all of that, right? So many people come to coaching with the idea that, okay, this person is going to tell me what to do, how to do it, who to be, so I can accomplish X, Y, Z. It's like, no, depending on the coach you are, right?
Yes.
Um, that is quite the opposite of what happens. And it's beautiful to watch you talk about it and to get these little subliminal messages along the way of like, what? Some cab driver is telling me I need to be a life coach? Like, this has never crossed my mind, but it's just amazing that you've landed where you are based on going inward, right?
Yeah.
Those subliminal messages of life. Everybody knows this acronym, or probably familiar with it, but false evidence appearing real. This fear that we have, and you said something. It was like you were undercutting yourself before anybody ever could give you the chance to say, even if the door was closed, hey, just not the right opportunity at this time. I'm going to do it first, so you don't even get the chance to do that. And this
Right.
conversation, so much that you've said in the beginning of this has just resonated with me, in the conversations that I've had with Jordan about aspirations that I have or he has, where it's like the first person saying no right out the gate isn't even anybody on the outside. It's that
Yes.
ego driven or whatever it is inside that's going, nah, man, because we need to keep you safe and tucked in. So I so appreciate you speaking to that, because it hits me profoundly in a way that helps me to realize, and anybody listening, that first person to say no shouldn't be you. If you have the dream, let someone else at least give you the guidance to direct you in a way. Maybe this isn't the fit, or maybe this isn't, but don't be the first one to shut the door. That's the craziest thing I kind of caught from that, is like the first person shutting the door is the person with the dream. That's wild to me. That's wild. And one of the things that you used, that you are in the space of now, is the breath work. And I'm curious because it's about an inward journey. And I was no more evident of that when we went through it before we started this. Your breathwork journey now, that practice in itself, can you speak more to that? Because I'm so curious. Everybody, it's a very it's grown in popularity now. What is that though that brings people to their center, or that you see at least?
With the power
With
of the
the
breath, you
power of
mean?
breathwork, yeah.
So I guess I'll start by saying, for me, the adding breath work to my practice was the last addition, and it has now become the core of all of how I support people, clients, groups, family. And it's so funny because, like I said, I've had a seated meditation practice for many years. I've had a yoga practice for many years, a movement practice, journaling, all these other ways that I've been able to go inward. But for whatever reason, breath work for me, I had this like serious aversion to. I would sit in some group breath works, and it just, I was so impacted by everybody else around me and like all the energy that people were releasing, that I couldn't even like be with myself. I couldn't get the release that I needed. And like I was just, I'm hypersensitive. And so, but I didn't know what was happening at the time. I was just like, okay, I just felt like a lot of anxiety and agitation and stuff coming up. And I'm like, this isn't really, and also a lot of numbness. And I was like, this isn't really doing it for me. Like maybe breath work just isn't for me. That was really where I was at for a very long time. And then I had some friends in my healing community say, you really need to go and see David Elliott. And so I'm like, okay. I go, and it changed my life. I mean, he is the real deal. He is a healer before he is a breathwork. So he is a healer. And he holds a beautiful space for you to breathe in a specific way. It's a pranayama technique. So, this breath practice, there's many pranayama techniques out there. This one, for whatever reason, has a unique ability to purify and regulate your energy, bring things to the surface that need to be released, create harmony and balance in your internal system. And actually, I will say it really was no different a practice than what I had already been doing outside of the space. But something about the space with him, the space that he held, was transformative. It allowed me to tap in on a level I can't even bring words to. And what I learned, and so I will say that from that moment forward, I knew that I had to learn from him. And so I went to his training. And the breath work is this vehicle, really, for you to connect deeper with yourself without having to make sense of it. So unlike, where we get really heady or we bring in a lot of like the mental realm for a lot of therapy or a lot of what we do, most of us, we live up here in the head. What the breath does is it allows you to access these pieces these suppressed emotions, repressed emotions, these false beliefs, these limitations you put on yourself, physical pain, all of it, you're able to like bring it up, feel it through the heart. What you're doing with the breath is like a lot of that stuff gets pushed down. Gravity's like pulling it down and you're holding on to it. You're not letting go of the pain and the suffering and the programs. And what the breath does is it allows spirit, a higher power, whatever you want to call it, to come through and move what needs to be moved, whatever's most pervasive on any given day. And the breath is what's happening is it's being felt in the heart, your feeling center, it's your heart, and expressed through the throat, through the mouth. And the whole essence of the practice is to open the heart, because we spend so much of our life armoring, protecting ourselves, defending. And so my experience in my first breathworks outside of the space with David was really just a reflection and a mirror of all the programs that were already running within me. You know, I had to learn about my boundaries. I had to learn how to protect my energy. I had to learn how to be in my own space and not be impacted by others, which, I mean, it's like such a theme in my life, why I wanted to do what pleased others instead of myself. I've had spiritual experiences through the breath work. I mean, it just opens so many doors, and I could talk about them forever.
You're captivating, Lex. If people aren't reeled in at this point, it's what I took away from that is there's so much access through breath, right? And you can access, especially for a lot of us men. I don't want to speak on behalf of all males, right? But a lot of men walk around, not fully processing emotions, right? And thinking, yeah, like whatever, I'll forget about it. And in reality, what's happening is what you just talked about, right? Like it's going deeper down into our gut and our soul, basically, right? And if we don't let it out, that's what leads to sickness, right? Like that's what leads to stress and to gut issues and XY,
Yeah.
you add to the list there. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe say a little more about that and just like kind of the healing properties of what this can do.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I think a big thing that I meant to touch on was the numbness. You know, we all have, and this is where the somatic therapy kind of piece of my work gets brought in. We all have defenses, defense structures, programs that have been implemented from the time we were by the time we were coming earthside, even starting in the womb. Things that we adopted, practices, it was life or death. Anything was life or death from ages 0 to 7. And we learn how to protect ourselves through these ego sort of programs, right? Because what we're doing is like, we're a spiritual being having a human experience. Okay, we go through the birth canal, we come out into this human body in this earth world, and we're like, where are we? You forget anything that may or may not have happened before. You are just new experience. Who am I? How am I supposed to exist in this world? And what's developing is the ego, and the ego wants to protect. And the ego, a lot of us, until we actually look at it, is just this little child who's just learning all the ways to protect that may not actually be serving them. And so some of it is like, you're in this like, a lot of men come from this like place of power, right? Like, not going to show my emotions, not going to, I'm tough. I mean, even for me, there was a power mask. Like, I hurt others before others can hurt me. That's not actually serving you, right? Not feeling your emotions, being cut off from your heart so that you don't get hurt, not having needs so that you don't get hurt. It's the same for like, CJ, what you said earlier. You said something like, if you, I'm gonna cut myself out before anyone else does. I'm gonna give myself the no. I'm gonna make it impossible for me before anyone else does. It's a protection. It's an ego protection. And through the breath work, we all have traumas, we all have wounds, we all have programs and patterns that aren't serving us. And it's hard for a lot of us to face it. But with the breath, you can do it from this place where you don't have to make sense of it. You don't have to actually understand why you are the way you are, or why you've become the way you are now, or the defenses that you have. But through the breath, it like gives you this path to release it without understanding it, to coming back to something so much deeper. It's about connection. It's about, like through a lot of the ego is about what we are not, right? And it's all around like separation, right? Like you are separate from other. You're in this disconnected place in a lot of ways. Breath connects you to yourself, connects you to your body, to your heart. Your heart is a portal to spirit, to your brothers and sisters, to Mother Earth. And so it's like you come back to that without having to understand all the stories surrounding how you got to where you are.
I'm curious. I'm hoping that other listeners at this moment are sort of realizing something. I have been this entire time. I have been breathing. This is my life source. And yet it goes on autopilot, or the unconscious awareness of this life-giving source that brings me to this conversation, that brings me to the present moment, here and here and here. And I've sort of realized why I would like to become a practitioner of this, because things that go on autopilot or go unconsciously examined can really be examined and curiously poked or prodded at with love. And my breath, I've always been like, breath work. Yes, I mean, I've got a pretty good grasp of what I'm doing here. I've been alive for 36 years. I can breathe pretty good. I've got this figured out. That operating system, I wrote this down, that it's a functioning operating system, like you both said. It's an operating system of life that you are going unchecked with. You're not even examining it. And it's the first thing that allows you to think, for the brain to move those things. So I had this epiphany. You're such a wonderful orator of the beauty of what that breath is, what it really is. It's a simple thing, yes. But just because it's simple doesn't mean that there's not a complex, deep layer behind it that allows for more enhancement of your life. So I just had to, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, that gives me life. And I don't even ponder it at all, or how it actually affects my day.
Yeah.
Whew. So,
Yeah. It's a powerful thing, and it often goes overlooked. But in reality, like when our breath stops, our heart stops, our time on earth stops. It is the thing. It's our life force. It carries our life force. And it's what connects us to something greater than who we are. And connection is at the root of it all. Like, I mean, that's been a big kind of realization for me, is just when I am, in my negative, like lower self, ego driven kind of spirals, at the root of it is disconnection. And so it's like the breath, it seems so simple, seems so like, how could it possibly be the thing that can bring you back to wholeness? But that's what the breath carries.
It's such a reliable anchor. Right? It's I love what you said earlier about coming back to yourself, right? So while we're on the topic, as far as there's these times where maybe you get into the lower self, right? And just wondering about on the other side of that, when you really are embracing this practice and living it out, what have you noticed about your interactions with other people?
I love it, and I love talking about the lower self. I think one thing I'll say, and this is I'm in a 4-year program right now, Core Energetics. It's where my institute that I'm practicing my somatic therapy work. And they have these concepts of the higher self and the lower self, and the core is at the center, and then there's the mask as the lower self. And what's beautiful about it is it relates back to like universal law of polarity or duality, right? You have higher and lower, good and evil. And it's this idea that we are both. We're not just like our higher self. We have to have this acknowledgement, this awareness and acknowledgement that we are also our lower self. We are also those pieces of us. And it's not to be shamed or judged or denied. The big one is denying them, denying that they're these pieces. Because what happens is when we give the lower self a place to have a voice, it loses its power. And what regains power is your wholeness, right? So like it's a beautiful source of like creative force,
And
the
and
lower
real
self.
and real quick, Lexi,
Yeah.
just if someone's hearing about this for the first time, can you talk to us a little bit what we're talking about when you say higher self, lower self? How would you define that, maybe in layman's terms?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you would think it is. The higher self is like when you're, you know, let's say, okay, I'll give it like an example. Let's say you are a person who is a big time people pleaser, right? You always want to do what's best for others at the expense of yourself, right? And there's something that's driving that, maybe a fear that if you don't please others, that maybe they won't give you love, right? There's something in it for you. Okay. But there's the lower self is like this piece of you that there's a negative association with what you're doing, like either at your expense or somebody else's. So in this case, I'm going to harm myself out of fear of not being loved. So I'm going to put myself I'm going to overdo my what I need, serving what's serving me in service to others, but at my own expense. There's some negative like thing that's happening. If you're in your higher self quality of that same sort of like behavior pattern of people pleasing, it's simply just somebody who wants to be in service to others, right? And has a gift of being in service to others. But you're not losing yourself in the process. So the higher self is like coming into alignment with your essence, with your core. And the lower self isn't something like that you want to like play around in and stay there forever. It's just acknowledging that it exists within you. So, for example, like having emotions of rage, right? Or grief. A lot of people are afraid, especially women, are afraid to express their rage out of fear of being crazy or misunderstood, or that there's not a place for them to express their rage. But your rage is sacred. Your rage is this power source. And it could be simply having a no that's so hard for you to have when somebody asks something of you. So there's power in it, this like reclaiming your own sovereignty. But when you're in a people-pleasing behavior, you're leaking. You're leaking your life force. You're leaking your energy. So that's not actually serving the people that you're pleasing or yourself. So this idea of higher self and lower self simply is like this quality of good and evil that's within each of us. Are you with me, or have I lost you?
I don't know.
I'm
Definitely.
absorbing it. No, we hold space
Okay.
afterwards sometimes where it sounds like it's like there's a pause there just to reflect upon that. There was this sort of saying that I was going along with Jordan that I thought of with you there, and the lower self would appear to be childish, and the higher self would be childlike in the ways it remains open and loving. And the childish way would be to be that, like, again, it serves purpose because it wants to be heard, but it says, here, scream for ice cream all you want, but let's talk about this real quick and have a conversation so we can break this down. I will hear you, but let me hold space to hear you. And again,
Yeah.
it sounds like that breath that really allows you to hold that space sometimes. It's just been simply finding your breath again to say, here, what are you saying to me? You're yelling
Yeah.
so loud, just calm down.
Yes. And this is where, because what happens is a lot of times we don't hear that part, right? It's like we don't want to even admit that it's within us. Women do this a lot, right? That like negative urge or that negative desire, that negative pleasure, right? Like they don't want to even admit that it's there. But what's happening is you're denying a part of your wholeness and you're losing your power in doing so. So
Wow.
it's not to say to like act on it and be vengeful or whatever. No, it's to have a safe place, which you can do that through the breath in other ways, expression in like a container, but having a safe place to express it where you're not hurting yourself or others, where you're learning how to have your own container be safe. Where you, like a lot of people are either on this spectrum of like shutting down or acting out. Acting out like, somebody with really bad road rage, shutting down somebody who is being verbally attacked and they don't say anything. They don't do anything to protect to stand up for themselves. There's a balance that we have to find that is a healthy ego, right?
Hmm.
And a healthy form of expression. And so it's different for everybody. It shows up differently. But like you have to find what that is for you and come into balance. And what it is honoring the side of yourself that's not that's in that you are in denial that it exists right now.
Jordan, if I can, real quick, when you talk about honoring yourself, this revelation came that if I'm honoring myself, then I the only way that I can honor you truly is then if I really do honor myself, because otherwise it is just a shell. That's, it's so crazy that if
Yeah.
I don't honor myself first, I cannot honor Jordan with a true friendship, or you, Alexi, with a true conversation. Wow. Mm.
The root of the breath work is, for me, it's all about self-love. Self-love is like the same frequency as the universal energy flowing through everything. So if you are in your own self-love, you are able to be in greater service and love others so much more than you ever thought was possible. I mean, I think we've all experienced not loving ourselves at some point or another and having to learn what it means to love yourself even more. There's a lot of vulnerability and humility that goes into that, intimacy, grace.
Yeah, and this is not the ego we're talking about here either, right? Like this is you're you're allowed to love yourself. And if sometimes we talk about it, CJ and I talk about it about being self-full, right? Like people may be like, well, that's selfish if I'm, taking the time to go and do things I need to do or, expressing myself in ways maybe people don't understand. But if you're doing it to be self-full, that's much different than being a selfish person, right? And being self-full can help you then contribute to other people that you love and things that you care about, including yourself, right? In a whole new way. So it's so beautiful how you're talking about it. And I'm just wondering what you see, Lex, as far as if a few more people, and by a few, I mean a lot.
The world.
Yeah. If more people were embracing these practices that you've touched on today, whether it be breath work or even tapping into yoga or just sitting in meditation, prayer, journaling, like there's so many you've mentioned, but the one we've been circling around quite a bit is the breath. Right? Like, what do you envision communities being like? States being like, neighborhoods being like, the world at large? What do you envision being different?
I really like this question. I will say the awareness that I received through working with the breath, among all my other practices, but I really think it started to become clear after having the breath as another practice, was this realization that we're out of balance, like on a world scale. And the practice of the breath is actually more feminine. It's a more receptive, receiving energy, right? You are receiving, you're having to surrender and receiving whatever is coming without fighting it or going on the attack against it, or so it's an active practice. And actually at the beginning of the breath, you're working with more masculine energy because you're kind of coming up against those limits energetically. You can feel them sort of like in your body, in your energy space. As you're breathing in the breath, you can feel them physically, that you're coming up against them. And then over time, as you continue to just be present, simply be present with the breath, you start to soften, you start to relax, and you feel it energetically. You start to open, your heart starts to open. So the whole practice is all about coming back into harmony of, again, polar dual forces, right? And if you look at that on a global scale, I mean, we are so out of balance. Like, we all have this feminine and masculine energy within us. Exactly. And when you look at what's happening in the world, when you look at colonization, you look at war, you look at extracting Earth's resources, you look at all the ways where, like, I'm going to chalk it up to like toxic masculinity. I'm not saying that's what it is, but like, it's very toxic what we're doing, and it's very masculine. It's very like active, pull, well, we're talking about Mother Earth, and we're talking about humanity. We're talking about this collective that all of us, within and without, have to come back into balance. And so this simple practice of coming back into balance within yourself has an incredible ripple effect on your community. And I mean, that's just what it is, right? Whatever we're going through internally, whatever war we're at within ourselves, is what is being played out in our external world. And things are coming up to the surface. There's so much. I mean, we all know it. We've all lived it, right? There's so much happening. And it's not all bad, because in order for that to be happening, there also has to be a balance that's happening, meaning there's a lot of awakening. There is a lot of good happening. So what we're doing with the breath is we're coming into consciousness. We're bringing the unconscious conscious. We're expanding our consciousness of beyond just the war, beyond, like, we're seeing what else is there, and we're doing it through the practice, our own practice, in whatever way that is.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how much I truly appreciate this conversation, because there are so many enlightening things that you say. And as we start to shift out of this conversation, I would love to hear. I've enjoyed so much of what you said today. I would love if there are any last imparting lessons or anything that you could give the listeners as advice from what Alexi knows, from where her standpoint is in this moment here today. Are there words of wisdom that you could impart on the listeners? I've taken so much from this. I truly appreciate it. But if I could just squeeze out a little bit more of your wisdom as we
I love it. I will say, just on the same theme of, like, coming back into harmony, these yin and yang, um, it permeates every layer of our being. And for me, in my own journey, I noticed how I was really working from the masculine, really like overworking the masculine, had totally suppressed the feminine, and like saw the feminine side of me as weak or unworthy or needed to be protected, needed to be hidden. And so, like, how I showed up in the world was so masculine, so much as, like, even, my career path. I mean, that's what it was. Through my journey, it wasn't just about um, working with healers and, all of that. A big part of it was learning how to express myself authentically and creative in my creativity. And that too is the feminine at play. And so, if, it's not just about seeing a therapist or practice sitting in meditation or doing breath work, this level of consciousness, this level of, like, bringing the unconscious conscious, right? It can come through play and curiosity and just letting things flow, like seeing what you like. Try writing a song. Try learning music, play an instrument, make pottery, dance. It's just about expressing yourself. That is about coming into balance. And so it doesn't have to be so, like, I think people fear meditation because it's like, oh, I don't want to sit and, like, be holy or be a monk or, like, no, it doesn't have to be that. Just have fun. Just, like, let it be easy, let it flow, be in your creativity. We are creative beings in a creative universe. It is our birthright to be the artist of our lives and to live our life by our design and not by default. And being in default is by allowing the programs to control you.
I'm glad I asked that question, Jay, 'cause this is hitting.
Yeah, mic drop. Yeah, amazing, Lex. Well, and I just love the through line of self leadership too. And it's up to us to lead ourselves through life, not other people. Right?
Yeah,
And we have the answers, the deepest, most profound answers for our own lives. Right. So thank you for that, Lex. And so
I
to
think,
go
can
ahead.
I add
Go ahead.
one
Yeah.
more thing? Sorry, it just came forward, and I really feel like it's important. Forgiveness and gratitude, the power of forgiveness and the power of gratitude, two things that are really overlooked in our everyday life. It's as easy as, like, giving gratitude for the food on your plate or the toes on your feet, especially when we're in this place of, like, oh, our life is horrible and life is meaningless. It's like, okay, well, guess what? You have all 5 fingers and 5 toes on each hand and each foot. Like, you've got a lot to be grateful for. You're here. So having, like, gratitude on such a simple level is such a really good way to bring us back to wholeness, to oneness, and forgiveness. Having forgiveness for the judgments we have on ourselves, the judgments our ego plays. And when we just give ourselves a little bit of grace with forgiveness, those are other two things. I wanted to say that because I think those are really good practices for anybody to just adopt at any time.
Yeah.
So sorry to cut you off, but
It's all good. Yeah. Thank you for the value add. And it's evidence of your approach as well, even bringing it full circle to you talking about, losing your father. And the gift we all have is perception, right? And perspective. So even if we are facing a difficult time, we could be grateful for that, right? Like it's part of the human experience. So it's making us more whole, if we sit with it and be with it, right? Instead of resist it and push it down, all the things we talked about in the conversation. So it's just a beautiful full circle moment. So I'm wondering two things. If anyone's interested in starting to explore, somatic breath work, meditation, maybe a couple thoughts you have around that, and then where can people find you? Because I guarantee people are like, who is this chick?
Find her.
I need to
Find
be in
her.
touch. Let us know where
Um,
to find you.
so where could people start? Um, there's a lot of, I would just say, this is going to sound silly and cliche, but like follow what is interesting to you. I think that's the most important place to start. If breathwork is piquing your interest, follow that. There's a lot of guided breathwork meditations all over the internet, or you can even look for one locally. I do them. If people need a resource, I do them weekly, virtually. But yeah, I would just say follow where your curiosity is taking you, and whatever that is. And then where can people find me? I have a website, alexikyle.com. I have a ton of offerings. I say a ton, a few. I work with people one-on-one, breath work, somatic work, like embodiment sessions, so movement. I hold space as like a somatic practitioner. I do one-on-one, like a 12-week program. It's called Self-Love Immersion, and it's all around finding what works for you to change from the inside out and really know yourself, really love yourself, be empowered, and remember who you are. So we work with a lot of different modalities as part of that. But yeah, that's it.
Well, that's it, but that's a lot. And the last, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated this. For the listeners that can't see, this is all like things I've written down from this that I truly was taking grasp of as you were speaking to it. We sincerely thank you for your time, your love, your care, and intention with this conversation because it was full of heart. It was heartfelt. So thank you so much, Alexi. To our listeners, please tap in with what she's doing. Jordan, any parting words for you, my man?
Well, I'm going to follow what Lex ended with is just gratitude as well. Right. So
Yeah.
grateful you joined us, and you're special. And we're really happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. It's been a joy, and right back at you. I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much.
Keep it up. Thank you.
All right. Until next time, Lex. Thank you for joining us today on the Practicing People's podcast. We hope you found our conversation inspiring and thought-provoking. We appreciate your support and passion for personal growth and self-improvement.
To help build the Practicing People's community, please follow us on Instagram at Practicing People's Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and engaging discussions. Liking and sharing our posts will spread the word about the podcast to others who can benefit from these conversations. You can also reach out to us at our website, www.practicingpeoples.com, for more materials and ways to tap into the community.
Leaving a rating and review on your preferred podcast platform is a valuable way to support us and help potential listeners discover our show.
Remember, personal growth is a journey we embark on together. Let's build a community where we uplift and inspire one another to achieve our true potential.
Thank you for being part of the Practicing People's podcast family. And until next time, keep practicing and keep growing.